6 in the morning. Rhinox Square is empty. The cobblestones are still wet from the night. The Baroque facades of the old town look exactly like a postcard. You can smell bread from somewhere. The city is 400 years old, and it has survived everything. Then the windows move. Not a sound first. Pressure. A flat, total wave compressing every pane of glass in your hotel room simultaneously inward. Half a second of absolute silence. Then a second impact, somewhere south of the center. Then a third. You are in Lviv, the refuge city. The city people fled to from the east because someone told them it was safe. The beautiful city, the old city, the city that had survived everything. It did not survive the math. That pressure against your chest wall, that is not fear. That is a shockwave passing through your sternum at the speed of sound. Fear, you can talk yourself out of. Physics, you cannot. Lviv, 49 degrees north, 80 kilometers from the Polish border. The westernmost major city in Ukraine, and in the spring of 2022, the single most valuable logistics node Russia needed to sever. Here's the strategic logic. Follow it carefully. Every Javelin system, every anti-armor round, every piece of NATO equipment bound for eastern Ukraine passed through Lviv. The rail lines converging on Lviv Central Station were the physical arteries of Ukraine's war effort. 30 kilometers northwest, the Yavoriv military training ground, where Western advisors and foreign volunteers were processing and staging, was the funnel point between NATO's supply chain and Ukraine's front lines. Russia knew the geography, Russia knew the rail schedules, and Russia had the weapon that could reach both from inside the Black Sea without crossing a single NATO border. On the morning of April 18, 2022, Russian missiles struck Lviv. 4 impacts, 7 dead, 11 wounded, including a child, 3 hits on military infrastructure. The 4th hit a civilian tire repair garage because the weapon does not negotiate with the geometry of its kill radius. Before that, March 13, 2022, more than 30 cruise missiles hit the Yavoriv training ground. 64 dead, 160 wounded, NATO instructors, Western volunteers. The Kremlin's message was explicit. Any logistics route supplying weapons to Ukraine is a legitimate target. They were not bluffing then. They will not bluff in the next war either. If you were in Lviv as a journalist, a contractor, a humanitarian worker, understand this now. The front is wherever the missile's guidance system places the crosshairs. Geographic distance from the trenches is not a variable that warhead physics cares about. The weapon that came for Lviv was the Kalibr 3M14 land attack variant, NATO designation SSN-30A, developed by Russia's Novator Design Bureau. Launched from ships and submarines operating in the Black Sea, hundreds of kilometers beyond Ukrainian territorial waters, and beyond the reach of any counterstrike Kiev could legally authorize at the time. The 3M14 is not a fast weapon. That is precisely what makes it lethal in a defensive context. This variant cruises at Mach 0.8, subsonic, roughly 270 meters per second. It uses a 3-layer navigation architecture, inertial reference at launch, GLONASS satellite correction in the mid-course, and terrain contour matching in the final approach. The missile carries a stored digital elevation model of the terrain beneath its flight path. It cross-references that map against its radar altimeter in real time and follows the surface of the Earth. Not over it. Along it. Cruise altitude 20 to 50 meters above the ground. Minimum confirmed altitude 10 meters. Here is what that number means for defense. A ground-based radar beam travels in a straight line. The Earth curves. At any operationally significant range, a target flying below roughly 200 meters disappears behind that geometric horizon. The radar does not see it, not because the operators aren't skilled, because the physics of curvature is absolute. Now run the engagement math for a patchwork air defense grid like Lviv had in April 2022. A missile at 50 meters altitude becomes detectable on a forward position radar only when it is already within 15 to 20 kilometers of the target. At Mach 0.8, that is roughly 60 to 70 seconds of flight time remaining. 60 seconds to detect, classify, confirm, lock a fire control solution, launch an interceptor, and achieve intercept geometry. Each one of those steps has a minimum processing time. Added together, they exceed 60 seconds. The missile was already inside the lethal radius of the engagement timeline before the radar operator could complete the kill chain. That is not a failure of courage or competence. That is a geometry problem with only one solution: dense, overlapping, low-altitude air defense coverage that was never deployed to western Ukraine in the first weeks of the war. Missiles got through. 7 people died on a Monday morning in April. in the most beautiful old city in western Ukraine, under Baroque facades that had survived 4 centuries. That is the ledger. Now here is the warhead. The 3M14 carries 450 kilograms of high explosive. The Kalibr's airframe total launch weight is approximately 1,570 kilograms. Against Soviet-era and Austro-Hungarian brick construction, the dominant building stock of Lviv's old town, the physics are brutal and sequential. The initial blast wave collapses load-bearing masonry within a 20-meter radius. Beyond that, the fragmentation envelope extends 300 meters in every direction. At 50 meters out, warhead casing fragments are still traveling at speeds exceeding 300 meters per second. Brick, rebar, window glass, structural steel. The building itself becomes the secondary weapon. Eardrum rupture within 100 meters. Penetrating fragmentation through soft tissue at 50 meters. The cobblestones you walked on at 6 in the morning become ballistic projectiles. Lviv's old town is particularly dangerous in this regard. The narrow medieval street grid channels and amplifies overpressure. A blast that would dissipate across open ground instead reflects off 400-year-old stone facades and propagates down alleyways like a wave through a pipe. The architecture that makes Lviv beautiful makes it lethal under blast conditions. When the sirens drop, you have approximately 10 minutes. Black Sea launch geometry, confirmed against the 2022 strike timelines. Do not spend those 10 minutes watching out the window or calling someone. The situation is already determined. A weapon is inbound. First, leave every exterior window immediately. A Soviet-era or Austro-Hungarian residential window under overpressure at 50 meters does not break. It accelerates. Hundreds of glass fragments at lethal velocity. Your curtains will not stop them. They are not ballistic material. Second, the 2-wall rule. 2 structural walls between your body and the exterior of the building. Interior bathroom. No exterior windows. Thick masonry on all sides. Corner farthest from the street. Prone position. Hands laced behind your neck. The first wall absorbs the primary blast load. The second wall stops the fragmentation wave and the secondary pulse. Third, if you are outside, prone immediately, face down. Every 10 additional meters of distance from the detonation point reduces your fragmentation exposure by a measurable factor. Use every meter you have. Do not run to Lviv Central Station. It is a primary target. It has been struck before. It will be struck again. And after the first impact, the area surrounding the station becomes a mass casualty compression point. After the strike, do not move immediately. Russian strike doctrine is sequential. The first wave hits the objective. The second wave arrives within 1 to 6 hours and targets evacuation corridors and first responders. Wait for a verified all clear through multiple channels. When you move, move west, not on the M10 highway, not on the main Shahini corridor. That is a logistics artery and a confirmed target category in any sustained interdiction campaign. Use secondary roads northwest through Horodok, through rural routes, away from the highway. Unpredictability is your only navigational asset when the primary route is a target. Carry these 3 things before you leave: a combat application tourniquet, a hemostatic dressing, and a chest seal. In a fragmentation environment, the injuries you will encounter, on yourself, on people around you, are penetrating wounds, arterial bleeds, and sucking chest wounds from fragment entry. A tourniquet stops a femoral bleed. Hemostatic gauze controls torso wounds. A chest seal prevents tension pneumothorax from a fragment that entered the thoracic cavity. These 3 items weigh less than 500 grams. They are the difference between a treatable wound and a preventable death in the 45 minutes before any medical response reaches you. Also carry a paper map of the Lviv Oblast. Cell infrastructure along a strike corridor degrades within hours. Your navigation application will fail you exactly when you need it. 85 kilometers. Say it again. A civilian body in street shoes on secondary roads through western Ukraine in April. By kilometer 20, the blisters have opened. By 40, the fluid is gone. Raw tissue against wet fabric. By 50, the knees lock on downhill grades. The quadriceps stop absorbing load. The joints take it. Structural shutdown in order. Night falls. April near freezing after midnight. Secondary road through Horodok. No light, mud where the asphalt has dissolved. Wet boots. Core temperature dropping. Shivering is the first signal. Confusion follows. When the shivering stops, your judgment is already broken. You will not know it. And through every kilometer, destroyed feet, frozen hands, darkness, you will hear things, distant aircraft, Rumbles you cannot place. Russian doctrine is engineered around this. The paranoia of a second wave is a deliberate force multiplier stacked on exhaustion and hypothermia. Your threat assessment degrades at the same rate as your caloric reserves. Plan for 30 hours. Eat before you leave the building. Carry more water than your optimistic math allows. That space blanket in your kit is as critical as the tourniquet. At hour 18, in a ditch outside Horodok, at 2 degrees Celsius with legs that have stopped working, it is the difference between a survival story and a Red Cross recovery in the spring thaw. From the Polish side, contact the U.S. Embassy in Warsaw. If you were enrolled in the Smart Traveler enrollment program, the consular system already knows you were there. If you were not, correct that before the next trip. There will be a next conflict. The logic that put cruise missiles over these cobblestones has not been dismantled. The production lines are running. The radar horizon problem is still unsolved. The missile does not know your nationality. It was assigned coordinates and a fuel load, and it followed the Earth at 50 meters until the math stopped. Your government could not intercept every one of them. I was part of that system. I know exactly what it can do. What I am telling you now is what it cannot.